Hi there, my name's Matt Lee. Until recently, I was the Associate Editor for Social Media at BJS Open, and I'm part of the Early Career Advisory Board for BJS. I've been asked today to talk to you about promoting your article after publication. So here you are, after you've got your article published, you've done the hard yards, you've been through potentially a couple of rounds of grueling peer review and revisions, and you sat celebrating your win, your publication in this hammock, looking out to sea, nice cold drink in your hand, thinking the hard work's done. And if you just want your article to sit there and potentially gather dust, then yes, that's true. But really, we want to do more. We don't want all that effort that you've put in to go to waste. We want to make as much as possible as we can from your efforts. And this is where we talk about different styles of dissemination. Really, you have two strategies to get your paper out there to really promote it. One of them is an active strategy. This is one where you really take the paper to people, to the audience, to the people who you want to read it and talk about it and show it to them, tell them about it, get your key message across. Your other option is to be a bit more passive, which you can see with the dog here. Just kind of lie back and hope it does its own thing and the message gets out there. And why does this matter? Well, in academic surgery and clinical academia and academia in general, citations are really one of the markers of success and impact. If your paper is cited, it suggests that it's interesting, it's relevant to your colleagues and to other researchers in the field. And it could be a mark of esteem particularly if your paper is getting cited by national or international guidelines. And also, at the selfish level, these things contribute to other metrics such as the H-index and the I-10 score, all of which can help with your academic progression. Of course, citations are a bit of a traditional way of looking at things, and they don't really translate into that direct impact on the field, change in the field. There's a couple of concepts which I might refer back to over the talk, but it's good to know about them as a researcher. One is the concept of an impact factor. Each journal that you publish in has an impact factor, and this is sort of an arbitrary number that's worked out by dividing the number of citations, the number of articles that were published in the journal over the last couple of years, and then dividing the number of citations of those articles over the same time period. Journals like BJS Open have an impact factor of around 4. And for BJS, it's more in the low teens. And there are a few journals out there that are very high impact, and it's just a measure of how often their papers get cited. Now you can see this really bright colored disc on the other side of the page. Citations are very last year and not really applicable to impact. This brightly colored disc is part of the altmetric sort of rosette, and it's a way of working out how well your paper has sort of penetrated into the consciousness of your colleagues and wider society. The rosette has different colors on it, some of which relate to appearing in policy documents, appearing on websites, social media, appearing in guidelines and being cited by other papers. So it's really quite a neat way of getting a view of the wider life of your paper. And we want that number to be as high as possible. 6,708 is a very high number, one most of us will probably not achieve, but it's nice to have a target. So how are we going to get out there? So I'll talk to you about passive dissemination. That's putting your paper out there, maybe going to a conference and hoping some people look at a poster or engaged enough during an oral presentation session to really take notice. But actually, you've got to promote. And thankfully, we've got some tools which are, broadly speaking, free at our fingertips, which much of the world uses. And you can see here that it is largely the social media platforms. And up here, I've selected X, formerly Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Reddit. There are obviously other platforms. I'm not going to really talk about Instagram or TikTok. I think they've got some special uses, but I'm not going to cover them here. So how do we use social media to promote our paper? Well, first of all, we've got to think about who we're trying to reach with our paper. Every paper that you write has a set of findings and a story and narrative that are going to be of interest to different groups of people. And different parts of your story will be of interest to different groups of people. For example, if you've written a paper looking at recurrence after surgery for pancreatic cancer, It may be that surgeons are very interested in some of the technical aspects of that paper. And so if you want to engage surgeons, you've really got to lean into the technical aspects. Patients might be interested in things related to quality of life. And colleagues such as oncologists might be more interested in factors related to that, neoadjuvant and adjuvant therapy. There's lots of different aspects to the story that can be told. But in order to do that, you've got to know who you're talking to. And the platforms will help you with that. When you've worked out who you're talking to, who you want to reach, you've then got to come up with this. Now, slightly Americanized term, the elevator pitch. This is a sort of business idea that you get in a lift with someone, and you have a couple of minutes while they're trapped in there with you to really get your story and message across. Now, social media is generally speaking short form. It doesn't really help with our attention spans, which have got shorter as we're more chronically online. So really, how do you get your message across to your target audience in the most concise way in either the shortest period of time or even the fewest number of characters? And finally, how do we communicate? If we're talking to our peers, particularly in medical professions, we tend to have our own language, our own set of acronyms and shorthand where we can communicate complex ideas in a matter of syllables or letters. And that's fine for people who are within your hospital culture, and you will know that some acronyms change from hospital to hospital. We tend to communicate our findings in English language, certainly those of us based in the UK, and that's fine. Much of the world does use English to communicate scientific ideas. However, using very complex and technical terms or very shorthand, the shorthand abbreviations can make it difficult to understand. So as you're there preparing a plain English, preparing your message for people, you really have to think about the kind of English that you're communicating in. This is going to be accessed by people from Europe or from other countries where turns of phrase and colloquialisms just won't make sense, and where long complex words may well lose people. So you've got to keep the words as short and to as few syllables as possible. Now, not only does that benefit communicating with colleagues in different countries, it makes it easier for the average lay member of the audience to read as well. And given that a lot of policymakers aren't drawn from our community, that's a group that we really want to engage. So let's start here, short form social media. You can see for this, I've picked Twitter, X, formerly known as Twitter. There are a couple of other short microblog type sites. So with this, you have 250 characters with which to communicate your idea, which is about doable. You get 250 words for an abstract. Why not really distill it down? But on top of that message, you have to do things that will make your message more obvious within the ecosphere of that platform. And on Twitter, we use hashtags, which is where you put the hash before a keyword, and that helps people to find it. So hashtag surgery, hashtag surgical research, hashtag SoMe for surgery are all popular ways of flagging surgical research. So you've got to take those hashtags out of the 250 characters. You also should put a link to the paper, particularly if you want people to go and access it very quickly just by clicking that link, and also for it to show up in your alt metrics. And I've talked there about image as well. Bear in mind, I've said we've got a very short attention span. You want to convey a complex idea or grab someone's attention. Images are the best way to do this, and they really do drive engagement with publications, with accessing original articles after things have been put out onto the internet. So we have some other forms of social media. Oh, this is an example of how we've used Twitter to promote a paper that was published in BJS Open. And in this one, we use polls, which is another function available on social media, asking a question about the key message in our paper, allowing people to debate the different options. Quite often, this will lead to some really interesting discussions and debates. And if you provide a link to your paper, it's a nice way of promoting it and showing what the right answer is based on your findings. We've then got things like long form social media. And these are really interesting, and perhaps we don't use them as well as we could. So if you were to think about these three different platforms, Facebook is one that everyone, a large number of people use, not necessarily in professional capacity, but there are certainly surgical interest groups and different disease groups on there. There are also patient groups. And like I said, we may want to reach patients and policymakers with our research. You've also got Reddit, which is a blogging site. A lot of anonymous users, but it's an interesting way to share. And I've certainly seen papers get some traction online, often for more humorous angles related to titles or author names, but they do get out there. And LinkedIn is quite a professional, network-focused platform. And this has been, some people suggest that this is replacing X as the more sort of friendly, less aggressive platform where you can share ideas in longer form. So you'll get different populations by posting on these platforms. They'll all let you post images and links, and they can give a bit more context to your research rather than 250 character elevator pitch. You've now got maybe a couple of hundred words with which to convey your idea. What I think is quite nice here is to provide a short 2-3 sentence summary of the paper, and then perhaps a little reflection on the key learning from the paper. What was unexpected, what was expected, has it reinforced your biases, has it changed your practice? Just something that other people can look at and go, yeah, that's interesting, I want to read that paper. I think it's also quite useful to have a challenge, a message, or a call to arms at the end of these posts as well. If you've done a study that shows bad outcomes after cancer surgery, it's very easy to post a call to arms. How can we work together to improve these outcomes? And that will engage some of the people in your networks to engage with your post, share it widely, and discuss it. And that's really what we want to do. We want to get the paper, the publication out there. I mentioned sort of visual engagement a couple of times, and we are very visual creatures. We like bright colors, we like pictures. They're very easy to understand, particularly compared to words. And this work from the Annals of Surgery showed that generating visual abstracts was quite a nice way of increasing impressions and sharing across platforms, and increasing the visits to articles, which you'd hope will ultimately translate into citations. Just to give you an idea of what goes into a visual abstract, here's an example of one from BJS Open. Journals will tend to have a template for these, which are in their own color scheme. And typically it's 3 panels that you get to tell the story, which might be background or method, results, and conclusion. You can see here, it's very bullet point, very simple, but there's nice infographics that have been used. Uses lots of icons and simple signs. So you're saving words. There's not really a language barrier. A lot of people will be able to understand this. And again, you include this with a link back to your paper, and it can share and get you that promotion through the alt metric. So really, visual abstracts, even if the journal you're going to doesn't use them, I'd recommend generating one yourself and sharing it across a number of platforms. And then the next mode of promoting your journal online is a video abstract. And I think this is something that we don't necessarily use as much as we could. With a video abstract, you have a bit more time to discuss and present your paper and some of the key findings and context. Now, it's important that it's an abstract, it's not a full presentation. So I tend to say aim for a couple of minutes, and bearing in mind that X tends to allow a short video upload of maybe 100 seconds, 120 seconds or so. So you've really got to get the message across quickly. The way that you can do this, you can record it in an online platform like Zoom in presenter mode, or you can deliver it on a slightly longer form platform like YouTube. And you just need to tell people about it, keep it simple, and share it. Now, some of the journals have their own YouTube channel where they can post this, and it will be shared and promoted through there. And again, YouTube will contribute to your alt metric values, and you can just share it across any other platform that you'd like to. Something worth doing, but does take a bit of effort. Put some pictures of newspapers here and talked about old school. One of the things that in a very online world, we forget about some of the traditional forms of media. If you've done a piece of work that really has some eye-catching findings, whether it's about health inequalities, outcomes, variation in practice, I think it is worth trying to get that, even just a short piece, in online news. And the way that you do this would be to talk to your institution, whether it's your hospital or your university, and talk to their press department and see if their press officer is interested if they can see the message there. And if so, they'll help you prepare a couple of 100-word piece with a couple of quotes, which they'll share with some friendly journalists, typically with a focus on health. And if they bite, you may well get a small article online or in press, and that can be used to promote your work further and really gain that impact. And we do like getting things in the news because it's seen as a sort of valid and trustworthy way of getting things out rather than just shouting into the void of social media. There are other ways of boosting altmetric, particularly blogs are quite a good way of getting your paper noticed. Now, BJS does offer the opportunity to authors to write a short blog about their paper, just maybe placing it in context and sharing some of the learning from delivery of research, again, contributes to your altmetric, and it's quite a nice way of rounding off and reflecting on what you've done. I've mentioned news items, and policy reports are a really great way of boosting that altmetric, of really showing your impact. Obviously, you've got to get things into the consciousness of people to start talking about your paper and referencing it. But there are opportunities to interact with policymakers, whether it's at conferences or whether it's through stakeholder groups and advisory groups when they're undertaking work such as NCPOD in the UK. But really getting it under the nose of guideline committees and other policy groups will help promote your work. And timing and opportunity are everything. When is the right time to start talking about your work online? Well, as soon as it's published online, when it's allocated to an issue. If you present it at a conference, or if someone gives a talk at a conference that's related to your paper, you need to be tweeting or posting about it. If someone's having an online discussion, you really need to talk about it at that time. If a policy group announces a project and inquiry, you need to be talking about it in social media at that time. And maybe you wake up one day and just think, hey, I really want to tell people about my project. That's a really good time to post as well. So in summing up, if you want to get your paper out there, if you don't want it to gather dust, you've got to pursue a strategy of active promotion. And I've given you some ideas of ways you can leverage different forms of social media and how you might use them to really get your message out there. And it's important that you use these to reach across a range of audiences to maximize your impact. So I just want to say thank you for your attention. I hope that was useful.